All right, so today's webinar will cover AR member processing. During the webinar, phones will be muted. I'm going to leave them unmuted today just because of the few participants that we have, so feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation where appropriate. So what to expect for a webinar there to enhance your knowledge of the software. It's presumed that you have already taken detailed Encore training from a Jonas trainer. This should be used as a refresher course. Approximately 50 minutes of information with 10 minutes for any questions and answers. So AR member processing, the webinar today will cover how to set up new members and dependents, how to set correspondence information and customize statement preferences. We'll review the account inquiry and drill down, so how to look at charges and payments on a member file, POS purchases, back office billing items that have been charged to a member account, how to hide charges. We'll look at credits, bookings, minimum histories, all of the information that's contained on a member file, how to make account changes, and a new feature, tracking account changes. So to add a new member, you're going to do so via Accounts Receivable Setups Members. So once you've logged into this setup, you'll see a grid of all your existing members, and you can click on the New button on the toolbar, and this will bring you to the core information window. The minimum required fields to complete a new membership is their member number, first and last name, membership type, club status, and date joined. That's the bare minimum. Now, you can obviously put in additional information and addresses and billings, but at the minimum, you must have these fields in order to save the record. Join date is a very important one that people often forget. You must have a join date. So this is what the screen will look like. So the member number is up at the top, title, first name, last name. We also give you fields for familiar name, middle name, suffix, and email. You can fill in work information. Then on the right-hand side, we have the membership type, the club status, again, both required fields, the date joined, gender is optional, date of birth is optional, marital status, and wedding day. And it's important to note that you can report on all of these fields, so the more information that you can enter for a member, the greater your reporting capabilities are in terms of creating custom reports in our business intelligence module. So the membership type and club status tables have to be pre-filled prior to creating a new member. So in the drop-down area here where we have membership type and status, in order to see those fields, you would have had to create membership types and statuses first. On the other hand, the title, occupation, business title, and employer fields are dynamic. So those you can add on the fly. I don't need to go create, an occupation called marketing manager prior to setting up a member. I can type it in on the fly. So as information is typed in these fields, their tables will auto-populate. Corrections to the title table can be made in System Administration System Setup. So if you have loaded member information and you have titles in there that you don't want, you can edit these in the System Setups for titles. Corrections to the other tables, again, can be made in AR setups. So if you have fields that have saved are showing in your drop-down and you don't want them there anymore, then under AR setups you'll see other fields like occupations and things like that. Other information for a new member, again, this is moving into the optional information, but most clubs are assigning an address for all their members. Contact information, so mailing addresses. You have to have at least one mailing address if you want that member to get a statement. It will give you a notification if you save without an address and tell you that there is no primary address for that member and therefore they will not get a statement. It would also remind you at month end when you're running your statements that they don't have an address and it would not print their statements. You must have an address if you do want to print statements. The required information for an address is that type of address. So that's something like home, business, other, vacation, summer home, winter home. That describes the type of address that they have. You must have an address line 1. We also allow you line 2, 3, 4, 5. Country, state, city, zip code, or postal code if you're in Canada. The primary box must be checked. Again, it will flag you if you try and save and it's not checked as primary. It's going to say there is no primary address assigned. And then the active box, obviously, to indicate that that's an active address. So this is what the new address will look like. So it has an address type at the top, has your address, country, state, province, and your phone numbers. The address type table must be pre-filled in AR setups. What that means is you have to set up address types before going to create a new member. Now, chances are you already have these done from your initial setup and load of Encore. But you can add additional address types at any time, and those would be found under your AR setups. As mentioned, an AR address type would be something like home or billing or business, work. Those are your address types. They're defined by the club. The United States and Canada, as well as all their states and provinces, are preloaded into the system. But if you have any members that come from other countries or provinces, then you will have to set those up here first before using for a member. So if you have a member from the UK or Barbados or a country that is not Canada or the United States, you must set those up under System Administration System Setups. It will be a setup for countries, and you'll indicate here the country name and whether or not it has provinces. The city table is dynamic, so what that means is we can type cities on the fly. These do not have to be set up ahead of time. You can type the city that that member lives in as you're setting up the member file. So in addition to addresses, you can also do email addresses. And so an email address can be filled in for a member. You can have multiple email addresses. You can add at least one email address if your club emails member statements. So you obviously have to have an address if you plan to email statements. The required information for an email is the address type. So again, same thing, work, home, other. You'll need the actual email address itself, and flag at least one of the email addresses as primary and active. The address type field, as mentioned, is the same table that you use for your physical addresses. Contact info, mailing, and statement options. So this looks like this. So our mailing and statement options is where we actually designate how we are going to address correspondence with a member. So there's multiple ways you can use mailing name, you can use first name, last name, familiar name. So there's all these different methods. So you're actually going to enter that on the member file if they have special ways that they want to be addressed. So by default, it would be whatever we picked on the following slide, first name, last name, etc. But if you don't want to use that member's first name and last name from their file, you could type in a special name for them using the mailing and statement options tab within AR. And so that allows you to put maybe a family name or a social mailing name. So some people like to be addressed differently than their first and last name that is listed on hand. I have a club that uses the family mailing name to put in the proper name of how their statement should be addressed, so that although it goes to the primary member, in the family mailing name field they would type, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, so that the statement's addressed to the family and not just the primary member. You can use the optional mailing title and names fields to override the statement mailing name. Once it's set, you can set that field as a default. So again, here's where we would say how we want the statements addressed. And then on the lower portion of the screen, you can see here, if available, use the title from, and so you can see family, formal, social, or regular. So that's just all the different fields on a member file that you could type in. So on the next screen here, you can see in-person title, regular mailing title, formal, family, and social. Now, it's not often that a member would have, all of these boxes filled out. Normally they'd have, either a formal or a family mailing title, and that's, again, only required if he does not want to be addressed the way his first name and last name would otherwise pick up on the statement. Correspondence info, this is one of the more important tabs on a member file, and it dictates how members receive correspondence or mail or statements. So by default, statements will be processed to the primary mailing and primary email address if you're printing and emailing. So if you do nothing on the Correspondence tab, it by default will go to their primary email and their primary mailing address. However, if you do fill out the Correspondence Info tab, you can manipulate how members receive their statements. So I can manipulate it to say email only. I could manipulate it to say print only. I could add secondary email addresses and say email to multiple email addresses when they get their statement. So the section must be completed if the member wishes for anything different than the default. When you set up correspondence information, you'll set the communication type, which is normally statements. Then you'll choose the address type. So this is, okay, what address am I going to send the statement to? Home, other, business. You'll set the from and to date, which means when am I going to follow this rule. You can flag the repeat annually box, which I normally do. So if I say use this rule from January 1st to December 31st, that means use it all the time and repeat annually. The other time that this could be used is if you have members that go down south for the winter, and so they need their mail at that address during the winter, and they need it at their home address at all other times of the year. So you can actually set the correspondence to and from dates to designate where they should get their mail based on the time of the year. Other fields on the member file, under the billing information tab, there's a miscellaneous sub-tab. The bill to account must be set to the primary member's account, always. So if you're adding a spouse or dependent member, by default, when you set up that spouse or dependent, let's say 100A, 100B, etc., or 100-1, 100-2 to designate the dependent, by default, the bill to will be to themselves, and that's not correct. We want dependents to bill to the primary member. So it is extremely important that on that billing info tab, you go change the bill to the primary member. And then, congratulations, you have now completed the minimum setup required for a new member. So if we talk a little bit about dependents now, which I touched on briefly, when you add a new dependent, you can follow the same procedure, click new on the toolbar, fill out their first name, their last name, their addresses, etc. Alternatively, you could duplicate the primary member account. So you could find the husband, or you could find the wife, or you could find an existing family member and hit the duplicate key on your toolbar and then just replace the first name and last name. That way the address is already there, all of their settings are already there, their join date is there. But again, very important that we go to the billing information tab and change the bill to the primary name, always. Because if you do not do this, then if a husband or wife goes and makes charges at the club, they're going to get their own statement at the end of the month. So the bill to designates who's getting all of the charges at the end of the month on their statement. You can add mailing addresses and email addresses to dependent members as you would primary members. So just because the primary member has an address, you could also add an address just for the spouse, you know, or the child if they have a job address, a work address that shouldn't go on the primary but should go on the dependent. There is a sync button on the primary member's mailing address, and if that is checked, then it means that any changes made on the primary address will sync to the dependent. So you'll see that address on both the primary and dependent member. And if you go in and change a phone number or change the address because they've moved, it will automatically update the records for the dependents as well, so it saves you a little bit of time. Other member information includes an edit log, and this is a new feature that a lot of clubs are looking forward to, and this edit log actually tracks all changes made on a member account. So it's an audit trail of changes made to select member fields, including the date, time, user, old value, and new value. So what that tells us is what field changed, when did it change, what user changed that, and what did it change from to. So you can also add notes or reasons to why a change was made and make it mandatory so that if someone is changing a membership type, you have to log the reason why you changed that membership type. So you can select this property and be able to track reasons, making it mandatory, so force your notes. These are under setup of accounts receivable, reasons, and reason categories to set up the reasons why you would make a change on a member file. The actual editing just starts editing automatically, tracking those edit logs. There are settings in AR settings where you can decide whether you want to force a reason upon making a change. The client edit log report and the client edit log inquiry, so those are under your AR reports, those are where we're going to actually grab the data that the edit log is tracking, so that's a report form. Alternatively, there is a tab on the member file itself that tracks changes, and I can show you that after we finish the slideshow presentation in the software itself. Other information, we have pop-up messages. So pop-up messages are useful because you can actually assign a message to occur on a member file in certain areas. So you can restrict these pop-up messages to point of sale, to food and beverage only, not golf, or to back office. And what these do is as soon as the member is selected in that outlet, it will pop up the message that you have typed in. So things like allergies or shoe size for golf or warning messages, maybe they're an expired member or suspended member and you want to pop up message information about them, you can use those. We also track images if you want to store images for your members, so you can attach a member's picture to their account, and this will display in AR members, so on their accounts themselves, and then also at point of sale if a server or a golf staff pulls them up at point of sale. Charges, so under the inquiry section you'll find charges that a member has accrued to their account. This will show you both back of house and point of sale charges that a member has. It'll show you the detail, the date. If they are in yellow, that means they are from a point of sale transaction where the day has not been finalized. If they are white, then either they are a back office charge or they are a POS charge that has been finalized. You can expand any of the lines on the charges section to view the breakout of the charge, the tax, the gratuity, the service charge, and you can double-click on a line item to open the drill down. So the drill down is really useful because it'll actually show you the details of that charge. So it'll show you the user who completed that charge, it will show you the date, it will show you the surcharges, it'll show you the charge code used, and if it's a point-of-sale chit, you can actually reprint the chit. If it is a back-office charge, you could reprint that audit trail. So it's a good way to locate that as well. So you can see here, you can click the plus sign on the left-hand side, and that'll expand the charge, but you can also double-click on it, and that will open the drill down. So the drill down you can use to view additional information. View audit trail will open that initial posting batch. You could reprint that, or view printed chit as mentioned. You could reprint the POS chit. You can view the sales charge code and surcharge codes used. So if you're wondering, is something going to the wrong spot, you can see what code it got coded to. If the transaction was printed on a statement and you click View Statement, you can actually bring up a copy of the statement and reprint it. If the transaction was paid, you can drill into the payment line to see details about the payment. And so this is what your drill down looks like. So this one obviously is not a POS chit. It's an audit trail because there's no POS chit at the bottom left. So it gives you all the details of that transaction. And this is a payment drill down screen. It looks a little bit different, and it shows you how that payment was applied. So what that $49 went to go pay towards, which was a dinner charge. Related to the inquiry is a hide charges feature, and a hide charges allows you to hide charges from a member's account. In order to hide a charge, it has to have not appeared on a statement, and it must net to zero. So I can't just hide an item from showing up on a member statement. I can't just, oh, don't show him that charge on a statement. You can only hide things if they net out to zero. So maybe you've charged something and then you made a mistake and had to refund it. And you don't want them to see that you had done that in and out. Or maybe you charged them and they called because they checked online and saw it and said, I shouldn't have been charged for that. So you refunded them and you just want to omit it from their statement. So you would select the two to hide and hit save, and that will hide them from the statement. Credits refers to club credit. So it's a module in AR for issuing shop credit or gift certificates. So you can use this screen to view the active and inactive member club credits. So sweeps, gift certificates, guest passes, prepaid dining minimums. If you expand a credit, you can actually see the usage details. So you can see here the balance on the top screen, and then in the lower portion you can actually see the redemption items of how that credit was used. The Bookings tab allows you to see member bookings, so in terms of event management, you can see if they have any bookings at the club. This would also include dining bookings, court bookings, health and spa bookings, and class scheduling, so any of those activity modules. So here you can see in the Bookings tab, they are attending a party and they also have a dining reservation. So it'll just give you that report form or calendar form or a list view. So there's the calendar form as well. So it's just a way of integrating the modules. You don't have to flip between the modules to see if they're attending anything. It's all right on their member file. There's also a tab for minimum history that will show you information for unused minimums. So where a member has a certain amount to spend, whatever they don't spend, they are billed. So you can use this to see their post-bill dining minimum information, amount to spend. You could make adjustments. You can expand each period of that minimum by clicking the plus sign and use the adjustment column to make an adjustment. So you can see up top amount spent, adjustment amounts, and all of the data tracked with how they came to have that amount spent. So the adjustment you can type in free form if you need to adjust how much they have left to spend. Maybe an error was made or you made an exception for that and you want to adjust their minimums. The fee billings tab will show you what regular scheduled billings they have. So you can use this inquiry screen to view a member's active and inactive fee billing agreements. So down below you can see the ones that are attached. You can deactivate one just as simply as unclicking the active checkbox. It'll show you the scheduled values and when that fee billing is set to run for. If it's to $20.99, then it's set to run for an indefinite time period. Sometimes you will have an end year on that, though, if it's just for a scheduled time. Installment billings, this is a new module that would also be integrated with the member account, so you can use the installment billings inquiry screen to view any installments that a member is subscribed to. The webinar for this was a couple days ago. You can view that webinar online, but it's integrated within the member account view. The purchase history tab, very similar to the charges tab, except it's only showing you the POS charges for the month, so you won't see back office billings. The documents tab. So the documents tab can be used to view a member's chits, club credits, statements, and other types of documents that at one point we would have printed from the system, so you can actually reprint them. You can also add member contracts, forms, and other documents to member accounts, so you could scan in and upload their member contract or their information for their file. Instead of having to keep a paper copy, you could scan that in, and it would be associated with that member's account. If you have leave of absence forms that they've filled out and you want to scan those in, you could scan and save them to the member file. You can also attach notes to chits and statements. Note that this is an add-on module and it has a separate fee. So if you don't have the Documents tab, which we'll see in the next slide, then you likely do not have this module or submodule. And so you can contact us if you're interested to find out more about it, because it is an add-on. So you can see here the Documents tab, and then that gives you access to chits, club credits, statements, and others, which would be ones that you load. And then again, you can add notes. Double-clicking on any of those files would allow you to bring up a copy of that chit or that audit trail. So again, if you don't have the Documents tab, it means you do not have this module. Contact information, this is just another display of where you've added addresses, so it's not an editing field, it's just a view field. And that is it for the slide presentations. Now, if there's anything that you'd like me to go over specifically in the software, we can do so, but that's the conclusion of the presentation.